Liam, one of the big pieces of national news that we wanted to kind of get your perspective on today, and obviously I'm sure you're at least vaguely familiar of, the Reddit Wall Street bets going to war essentially with Melvin Capital. For anybody who's just tuning in, we can give a brief summary. Essentially, Melvin Capital, one of the largest Wall Street hedge funds, I believe they had, last time it was public, $12.5 billion in operating capital that they were responsible for. It became public knowledge that they had a very short position on GameStop. Reddit, particularly the subreddit Wall Street Bets, kind of got a hold of this and organized a big pump to drive up the price of GameStop. Essentially screwing over Melvin Capital, who had this, short position. Now they were going to be, not just millions, but hundreds of millions, if not, over $1 billion in debt, essentially collapsing the whole hedge fund. In light of that, there's been lots of calls to heavily regulate this. Robinhood, which is owned by Citadel, they stopped the trading that could occur as a way of essentially allowing the Wall Streeters in the hedge funds to pick the pockets of the individuals who had outsmarted them and allow them to basically continue to cheat and have the upper hand at the expense of the working class individuals who had banded together to kind of give them a taste of their own medicine. I'm just wondering if we could get your thoughts and perspective on that today.
Yeah, I posted a pretty savage meme about this yesterday, actually. I have to say I'm thoroughly on the side of the Reddit users and everyone else who are basically trying to, give Wall Street a taste of its own medicine, so to speak. Something I've been trying to point out to people throughout, and I mean, partly this is just my nature, partly it's my profession. There's a certain amount of teaching I try to do in politics, and I will reach out to people and try to help them understand that the way the media talks about the economy is bullshit. The stock market and unemployment numbers are not the economy. The money circulating amongst people and businesses, that's the economy. It's how much we are spending. The movement of cash, that's the real economy. And we've drifted away from that. And these people that are now, these hedge funds and all the rest of them, if you look back at the 1960s, 90% of stock market transactions were in the real economy. They reflected actual investment in American jobs and industry, actual productivity. Today, 90% of it is speculation.
It's Bill Clinton.
It's people passing these ones and zeros around in their computers, making themselves rich out of nothing.
All fictitious capital.
Screwing us. Because the whole point of the capitalist system, the whole foundation, is that people bring that cash together and they invest it in the real economy and create jobs. That was the reason to create stock markets in the first place. It was the reason to tolerate the existence of corporations. It was easier to raise capital to then actually grow the economy. If the money is just going to float around in this giant, I don't know, I mean, most of the expressions I can think of this are pretty caustic, but it's just completely vacuous. It's just circling around doing its own thing and it has nothing to do with us. Then they're not helping anyone. They're only hurting us. The fact that we have deregulated Wall Street to such a massive extent is a serious problem with our economy. And as far as I'm concerned, until they fix the lack of regulation on Wall Street, I hope more of this happens. I hope more people rise up and screw the people on Wall Street.
Yeah, I'm so happy that you said that because that's exactly my position, right? Obviously, I think that the repealing of GlassSteagall by the Clinton administration was a disaster for the American public, and the fact that you no longer had to have speculative banks separated from, regular typical community, the bank that you store your money in, for people who are listening, right? And making that separated, that created a huge problem in American, economics, and particularly on Wall Street. However, the people have been fucked on that for decades, right? Since Bill Clinton was not my whole life, people have been screwed one bubble after the internet bubble, the housing bubble, the COVID bubble. I'm not that old. That's a lot of bubbles. So 100%, I think you're correct that as long as we're going to have the game played like this, it has to be the same rules for Wall Street as Main Street. Absolutely. However, I did want to pick your brain a little bit and talk about your, some of your ideas for banking reform broadly, not because I think that we should be cracking down on the Robinhood user base. Far from it. I think if we're going to have Wall Street, it should be democratized to the greatest extent that it can be. But we do need to do something about these massive hedge funds because as it, Citadel, they're just going to shut it down and make it, rigged again for Wall Street. So how do we, prevent that from happening? Regulate our banks and, keep the working people from getting screwed.
Well, I mean, start with the basics. We need a 21st century version of Glass-Steagall. The kind of reforms that were put in place in the wake of the Great Depression are the reason that so many recessions after that did not become massive depressions. We have returned since the 1990s to depression-style economics. And we keep building these bubbles, and then we keep, throwing Band-Aids on afterwards whenever things, go wrong, inevitably, as they're going to go wrong over and over again. And all that ends up being is a massive cash transfer scheme. It's a con. We have to actually put back the regulation that can prevent these sort of things. So a 21st century version of Glass-Steagall is a first big step. The next is actually bust out some of that old antitrust type legislation and break up these big banks. If you are too big to fail, you are too big to exist, period. They need to have enough cash to cover their existing speculation, to cover their existing debt. If they don't have the cash available to do that, they're not functioning as a bank anyway. It's a
Ponzi scheme. If you have to bring more money in before you can pay and do your thing, it's a Ponzi scheme.
It reminds me of the buying on margin in the 1920s that helped to cause the Great Depression. You're just buying things, when you're massively overextending yourself constantly, and then oops, when something goes wrong, you're like, Uncle Sam, can I please have some cash? And this whole socialism for the rich is just, we absolutely have to stop bailing out Wall Street. And the way to stop bailing out Wall Street is to break up these damn banks.
Yeah, I'm wondering, Liam, if you see any potential in this fiasco or this huge upheaval on Wall Street, whatever you want to call it, the Wall Street bets phenomenon, which is breaking out. I wonder if you see any political potential for this and kind of this a broad populist message or movement, because, I'm not someone that really understands all that much of Wall Street. I've never been someone that's played with stocks or got involved in that in any way. But something that I can sense from this whole episode is that there is a very broad and untapped populist energy and uprising potential that is manifesting itself, right now online in a way that we've never really seen before. Obviously, we had the Occupy Wall Street movement that was, very physical, people literally in the streets of Wall Street. But this is all online. It's this digital coordination strategy, which has, upset the markets in this way that no one could have predicted, that no one saw coming, and that they're still reeling from, potentially dealing with massive, financial consequences. So I'm just wondering if you think, this is just another episode in unmasking the elites and unmasking the power centers behind who's calling the shots, who's making the legislation, buying off our politicians, and how someone like a candidate like yourself could potentially translate that energy.
It absolutely is. And it gets back to this being a Trump district. And something I tried to point out to people a lot in this race is that the answer to a right populist is a left populist. When right populism is taking off, then that's a sign that our side has given up too much of the working class and is losing that energy. And I think that that's one of the vote total we had is actually higher than Ken himself had in any of his own previous wins. We were way above our win number. And again, it's only the unusual circumstances that saved him there. And I think if we had that last 8 months where we could have been out knocking doors and talking to people and doing events, we would have continued to sway more and more the people that we needed on that kind of message. There's a tremendous amount of direct overlap. I mean, I'm seeing this just floating around like the meme communities, online discussions and whatnot here, where I don't know, your Bernie bros on one hand and your MAGA types on the other are both kind of like united in this whole like Wall Street. And I've read a lot of I was on Reddit all day, basically just following this. And, I saw that through line that was solidarity amongst working class, right? It didn't matter where you were from. People, and one thing that really stood out to me when I was reading about it is this guy wrote an open letter to Melvin Capital. And it was basically his reason for doing this. Why he was going to max out every credit card he had, why he was going to hold until he died, lost everything. He was, he was banding and he was ready to go. And he was, massively leveraged on this. And, he wrote about how, this is the open letter. And he wrote about how, he asked the people at Melvin Capital, do you know what it tastes like to eat tomato soup made out of ketchup packets you stole from your school cafeteria because you don't have anything to eat when you get home? Do you know what it's like to, watch your parents make a little bit of extra income and make money and get, and just use it to help their friends, help me build a shed in the backyard because your parents understood what it's like, the devastation to not be able to feed your children. So as soon as their economics stabilized, they passed it
on, because that's working class solidarity. And that's the through line between all of these people on Wall Street Bets, right? And, as you know, and I'm an anti-capitalist, so far be it, I would have never found myself to be cheerleading a bunch of fuckers that were making, trying to, make money on Wall Street. But the fact of the matter is this is a proletariat movement to overthrow the hedge fund guys that have been fucking everybody on Wall Street. So I think that this is such a moment and such an opportunity for this new populist wave of left-wing populism to really offer the people something special. So I'm happy that you're seeing that and using it to as part of your campaign's fuel.
Yeah, I mean, just think about, okay, you mentioned the little nickname, and honestly, I get pushback from Democrats by saying Crooked Ken Calvert a lot, and the main reason to do it is that the more conservative voters are more animated by outrage, by that emotion. And if you can show that Ken Calvert is a swamp monster, Donald Trump is like, hey, we should drain the swamp. What about all these elites that are just screwing you? I mean, yeah, granted, his cabinet was packed full of lobbyists. He had no intention whatsoever of doing it, but he was brilliant to run on Drain the Swamp, because 90% of the population, Democrat or Republican alike, doesn't matter where you stand, they all know that the system is corrupt, and they all know they're being screwed by Wall Street, and that Wall Street owns the capital. Yep. And there's a lot of people who agree, regardless of where you're going. Again, that working class solidarity, we know we're all being screwed at the end of the day. And Trump tapped into that, and it's what made him a powerful politician on the right, was playing with that right populism. If you're running against somebody who's trying to play more the establishment role and has been transparently benefiting himself for decades, this will be 30 years for Calvert in Congress. He's made himself a multi-millionaire in the process. He doesn't even live in the district. He's got a nice cushy house in Newport Beach that he can live in. I mean, he's taken in tons and tons of money from lobbyists, from the swamp that Trump was supposed to drain, right? If we can continue to tap into that and to show people that I'm going to stand with working people. We don't have to agree on every issue, but I'm going to fight to improve your income, to make things better for your family. I think that's something that people, left or right on social issues, we can agree on those basic economic points.
Yeah, and just to kind of connect this back to what's going on right now, we have Janet Yellen, who is, formerly the chair of the Federal Reserve. Now she's Secretary of the Treasury, now that Biden's been officially inaugurated, and she took $800,000 in speaking fees from Citadel, right? And now is going to be the one in Joe Biden's ear to tell him about the fate of Robinhood, to tell him about the fate of, what's going to happen with these GameStop stocks, what's going to happen with all of this, and to have the White House just pretend as if there's no conflict of interest there, to have all of these politicians just bold-faced lie as if they don't understand that they've been bought off, bribed, made complicit in this, decades of pickpocketing the American people, cheating them out of money in this, casino-fication of the stock market. I'm wondering what your ideas are on, keeping big money out of politics moving forward.
Well, again, we are going to be better off under a Biden administration in a number of ways. The main one is actual competence, putting people in charge of departments and have more of a clue at how to do it, instead of the old Republican strategy of regulatory capture, where you're putting competent people and drive government into the ground so you can
privatize. Head of the EPA, if you don't believe there should be an EPA. Yeah,
exactly. The old Grover Norquist thing. I want government so small I can drown it in the bathtub. I mean, that's their shtick. We'll actually have a functional government. Okay. But and while Biden is notably less authoritarian than Trump and notably much better on social issues, on the economy, he's a fraction farther right than Trump. There's almost no difference there at all. So to think that this is somehow going to be a better for working people, it's really not. We will get a better deal for working people when we replace the people in Congress. And that's it. And the only way to do that, you're mentioning how can we get big money out of politics? The only way to do that is to pass comprehensive legislation to do it. And hopefully to get enough of the state houses and enough in Congress to pass a constitutional amendment to get some of this stuff out of there. But the only way to do that is to really tip the balance of power. It's not going to take replacing everybody, but if you replace enough people in one of the parties to tip that balance, enough people in there running on clean money pledges, then more of the people in there they're going to get worried about being primaried, and they're going to stop taking that big money, and they're going to sign on to banning it. And then you can actually pass the bills to ban that big money in there. I want comprehensive bans on cash lobbying. Lobbyists, if you think of where it came from as an idea, and this is an old idea in American history, it was literally catching someone in the hallways and saying, hey, I've got this cool idea. Can we do this? So it's basically the equivalent of having a meeting with your representative and saying, I think we should do this. It shouldn't be, here's a wad of cash.
Bribery.
Yeah, in the 19th century, you could walk into the Capitol and hand someone an envelope full of cash. They don't do that anymore. They dump it into an unregulated super PAC that's then going to dump that money into your reelection campaign through independent expenditures. It's a completely corrupt system. It is transparent bribery. And again, 90% of Americans understand that our Congress is bribed. But the only way we're going to get the legislation to end the bribery is to beat the odds and elect enough of the Cori Bush type candidates, elect enough people like me who are going to fight back against it and pass a comprehensive ban.